Welcome to what must be one of the most beautiful ancient sites on the planet. We're here on Carthage in Tunisia, a site that began its history almost 3,000 years ago. It was the centre of a huge empire that stretched right across the Mediterranean. In fact, it was destroyed and then it was rebuilt by the Romans. Well, thanks to the protections that have been given to this site, much of it remains intact. The baths are still here, the theatre, and indeed the forum as well. Well, we're here today to bring you this very special programme on the north coast of Africa in association with UNESCO. And first of all, we're going to find out a little bit more about Carthage, and I'm joined by my first guest on the programme, Nesrine Nazar from the National Heritage Institute in Tunis. Thanks very much for being with us, Nesrine. First of all, just tell us a bit more about Carthage itself. I mean, why is it so important a site?
You know, Carthage is at the list of World Heritage since 1979. This is, of course, thanks to the opulence of its sites and monuments. And in reality, it occupies a very strategic situation. It's on the crossroad of the two basins of Mediterranean, and it occupies the bottom of the peninsula of the Gulf of Tunis.
And we're coming to this amazing villa site here. There's some specific things that you really want to talk about, including the mosaics.
In reality, we are on the well-preserved Roman house of Carthage. We call it the House of Avery, La Villa de la Volière. It's named after the mosaic of its peristyle. We have a nice catalogue of birds. That is why we have Avery house. In reality, it's not the unique mosaic that we have. We have another one, which is so big, composed about 190 squares. We have small panel of mosaic showing horses, and also we have scene of mythology. For example, we have the representation of Sappho, and small also panel with different types of marble.
And also here there's beautiful statues which we can see too.
Of course, we know that Roman was very interested by art, by decoration, so we have some statue, and for Carthage we have a very nice speciality. We have local atelier, we have sculpture done in Carthage, but also they use it to import sculpture from Greece. And we recognize this, of course, thanks to the quality of marble and decoration. For example, here we have a nice notable with its tunic, but also we have a nice representation of scene of mythology with Apollo, the god of beauty and love.
Perfectly fitting. I wanted to finish by asking you, Nesrine, just why you're so passionate about this site. I mean, what is it that really attracts you to it?
Carthage is so interesting, you know, and we believe that we have to preserve it because we consider that it belongs to the future generation. For example, you know, in our constitution, on the Article 42, we have at the end that the state preserve the heritage, the patrimony to the future generation. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme today. Nesrine Nazar from the National Heritage Institute in Tunis. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to show you a little bit more of the site now. We're going to meet some of my guests in just a moment. But first of all, perhaps this is a moment when we should think about heritage itself a little bit and ask ourselves, do we all actually know what heritage is? Well, this is the moment to find out. Let's find out a little bit more in this from Andrew Hillier.
They've stood the test of time. Kairouan in Tunisia, Essaouira in Morocco, Algeria's Tassili Niger, an iconic prehistoric site, Australia's Blue Mountains, the Mahabalipuram temples in India. Whether they're treasures that are cultural, natural, in one country or across several, they're all part of our heritage. The works of the architect Le Corbusier, for example, span many countries. At its most basic level, heritage is what we inherit. It can be a house, a painting, or jewellery. But on a larger scale, that heritage can belong to a country, or even the world. Heritage is divided into two categories, cultural and natural. Living heritage. Treasure that needs protection. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization has a list of sites at risk. But all is not lost. What has been damaged can still be repaired. Looking after our heritage is one way of protecting it, and that's the only way to pass it down to future generations.
So there you go, that's what heritage is. But let's find out a little bit more. We're going to talk to my guests who are joining us here on the programme. And with us is Karim Handili, he's head of culture at UNESCO's regional office for the Maghreb. Also Leila Ben Gassem, she's a consultant and founder of Blue Fish, which is an organisation which designs and implements projects that target heritage preservation and cultural diversity. And Ednan El Ghali is an architect who's worked for several UN agencies and international organisations in the fields of development and cultural heritage. Thanks to all of you for coming in talking to us today. Karim, I want to start with you. We saw that film just a few moments ago which showed us exactly what heritage is. I mean, what do you think it is and what is so important about it?
Well, I mean, this film shows something absolutely amazing, which is the diversity of heritage in the world. I mean, we are about to celebrate next year the 50th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention, and what's very important is that beyond the safeguarding of these iconic sites, the convention has become with time an incredible tool for the safeguarding of heritage beyond the World Heritage List, actually. And the recognition of this diversity is absolutely essential to preserve those testimonies from the past. I mean, we saw examples like the works of Le Corbusier, which is an incredible contribution to modern heritage. So even the categories of heritage we are dealing with today are really new, and it brings also a lot of support to this work we're trying to do for this diversity. And this is very important for this shared heritage. And I think this notion of shared heritage, not only belonging to one country or to one region, to the world, and this shared responsibility is something that we think is important to highlight.
And Leila, we were talking before we came on air, I mean, you're a businesswoman, and you see as well the way that business can kind of help and be involved in that process even.
Yeah, I think we underestimate the potential of our heritage and culture to create opportunities. I think it could be an important tool that local governments should consider in their territorial marketing, and I think that's the best way to preserve it, by communities appropriating their heritage and repurposing it for their reality. And I think heritage needs to be, I think it's priceless to have this important heritage that we have inherited, but also heritage is dynamic. It needs to be readapted, it needs to be repurposed, and youth needs to be part of it to give it new meaning.
Yeah, we're going to see a film about that a little bit later on. I mean, Adam, would you agree with that? Heritage is dynamic. I mean, it might not sound like a natural phrase, but it's a nice way of putting it, isn't it?
Of course, I think what we saw in the last decades is the total implication and commitment of the local civil society. It changed a lot in the last 10 years because civil society make itself more present and advocate for the preservation of the most remarkable building of our heritage. It was not really the case before. Of course, civil society organizations were present in the field, but since 2011 they are more present than ever, and they are advocating for this preservation and playing a key role.
Well, at this point, we're going to show you a few other sites as well here in Tunisia. We can show you a map, in fact, just which shows the there are indeed seven different UNESCO sites right across Tunisia. We're going to talk about a couple of them. First of all, Karim, I know you particularly wanted to pick out the Medina of Sousse and the Medina of Caravan to mention. Why are those two places that you particularly wanted to talk about today?
Well, they're very important because they are testimonies to the evolution of human occupation in this land, I mean, in history. Also because of their role as, at some point, in terms of connecting this land with surrounding territories and beyond also the Mediterranean Sea. So this is very important because we can, through these sites, understand the way people inhabited this land at that time, and then the evolution since then. And also, it gives a lot of information on other aspects, like the architectural practices, what kind of techniques, what kind of materials were used. And also, and this is very important, I guess, to highlight concerning urban heritage, is that there is a complexity of this living heritage, and also taking into account the fact that you have the intangible heritage that is absolutely essential. And you cannot separate, and this is something important, we have to highlight. We call it, in our jargon, the synergies between the conventions linked to UNESCO. which is to take into account the fact that heritage has many aspects and that the interaction between them is important. And final word, and I would like also to take this opportunity to say that this year we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of a very important normative instrument, that is the recommendation on the historic urban landscape. This recommendation brings a new way of looking at the territory, dealing with urban development. We are on a site here that is also facing the pressure of urban development. So it is the case of Medinas like Sousse and Kairouan, but others in the country and beyond. And this is important because this new way of looking at the territory, considering interactions between all those components, economy, social issues, etc., gives more tools in order to safeguard on a sustainable way that heritage.
And Leila, do you agree with that? I mean, bringing lots of different organisations and lots of different groups of people together is the way to kind of develop and ensure that heritage thrives?
Yes, for sure, especially when we talk about Medinas. It's really, they face tremendous urban challenge, as Karim said, it's in preserving the architectural heritage, but also repurposing it in a way that respects the heritage, but also gives it a new meaning for today's life. And I think from my experience in the Medina of Tunis, it's extremely important that all parties come together. And I think this is another challenge in Tunisia. Private-public partnership is a long way to go. But I think there's a lot of not only civil society, but also private sector, social entrepreneurs are coming together to create new realities that cause change bottom up.
Yeah. And Adnan, Leila there mentioned the Medina of Tunis. I know you've been working there as well, haven't you?
Of course, and I think in the Medina of Tunis what is very interesting is that many different organizations and civil society organizations also were able to work together. That's really the solution. I think the heritage is not only about buildings, it's mainly about communities also. So we need to work together and we need a better coordination also in communication between all the stakeholders.
And we saw in the film as well that it's not just individual sites that are around the world which are also important. Karim, we can show some images of several mosaics which are particularly important artifacts which people here in Tunisia are trying to keep restored at Oudna and also at Hydra. And you feel that that's very important as well, don't you?
Yeah, it's important. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned this case because it brings interesting thoughts. For instance, when an object that important, like a mosaic, for instance, is found on an archaeological site, the practice before was to move this mosaic to the National Museum, for instance, in the capital in general, which, of course, was sort of guarantee of protection and proper conservation, because not in all countries you have means everywhere to conserve heritage. But at the same time, then, with reflection, it appeared that it was somehow a pity to move an iconic archaeological object from its setting, because also having it in its setting allows understanding more about what this object tells. This being said, when you keep an object in an archaeological site, particularly in a remote area, or in an area where you don't have those tools to conserve, then you have to make sure that you can make proper conservation and also, very important, to ensure proper protection against, destruction, vandalism, pillaging, potential illegal extraction from the site, and then illicit trafficking. So it's a kind of balance to be found, but the reflection is somehow more and more towards keeping those objects and also making those places attractive. Imagine a person coming to visit Tunisia and hearing about this incredible mosaic of Hydra. Rather than having it in the Bardo Museum here or somewhere else, where it would be certainly very well presented and protected, going to that place is also part of the discovery and part of the, let's say, of the story that this object tells.
Leila, do you think that's possible, though? I mean, isn't that slightly difficult? I mean, Karim indicated as well in his answer that actually, although the ideal is to do that, that involves money, doesn't it? Either coming from governments or from some kind of private initiative.
I totally agree with Karim. I think, again, I can't emphasize the point enough. I think local communities need to appropriate their own heritage. It needs to be part of the territorial marketing. The municipalities need to document, publish, what heritage they have, and they use it for territorial marketing, for local development, for creating ecosystems that will create economic income for nationals that will understand the meaning, but also appropriate the heritage. So I totally agree. I think in Tunisia, I don't think there's a hectare without a piece of heritage that we can tell a story about, whether it could even be natural heritage or farming heritage. And I think the local communities need to appropriate and use it to attract investors, to attract private sector, to make a positive story for young people in the communities.
It doesn't make it difficult for tourists, though, if it's part of tourism. Let's face it, heritage is part of tourism, isn't it? But if you are a tourist and you come to Tunisia, if you can go to one place and see everything, isn't it kind of easier than having to go to 14 different places?
I'm an elected city councillor in a small town behind the mountain over there. And I strongly believe that it's municipalities that need to be involved again, because they will create the ecosystem for travel, for logistics, licensing what is needed as restaurants, toilets, anything that is needed to make the site have a purpose in its own community. I think moving everything to the capital or to big cities deprives communities that are rich in heritage, an important potential for economic development.
OK, well, thanks very much for being with us. We're going to continue the debate very shortly here on France 24 in this very special programme from this beautiful site here at Carthage in Tunisia. So do stay with us. We'll be back right after the news, so don't go away.